On-Tap Plumbing and Gas covers all Perth areas from Mandurah to Two Rocks and has a team of plumbing, drainage and hot water experts. They have an amazing reputation for their excellent service and quality workmanship on time, every time, and it is easy to see why they are a favourite to many Perth property managers. Whether you just need some friendly advice or an obligation-free quote, look no further than On-Tap Plumbing and Gas.
Welcome to the PM Collective, a dynamic hub designed to empower business owners, property managers, and BDMs to excel in their careers. Through access to intimate conversations, cutting-edge video training, mental health support, and unparalleled motivation, our community is the ultimate destination for individuals seeking to elevate their professional lives to new heights. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our next conversation on our weekly podcast, The Art of Property Management. I am super excited to have the lovely Katie Johnson on today's podcast for all you listeners. And we have got a really good topic that is not really talked about. And we're going to really sort of dumb it down and just break it down because it's a question that people don't naturally like to ask because it's about financials and starting up a business, but it's really important to know how everyone has done it in the past. So what I'm talking about is starting a business and how much money do you really need to start a property management agency or a rent roll. So Katie, over to you. Can you please intro yourself and let everyone know about you and your business and where you started and where you are now?
Okay. Well, firstly, thanks for having me. I'm excited to get to chat with you again. And I'm super passionate about this topic because I'd started in property management and truth be told, I used to get a little bit bored with it. I would go to these conferences and just be so inspired by people like Dennis Youssef would talk and I would sit there and be like, oh my gosh, I want to do this, this and this. And you'd come back and you'd be taking photographs of toilets and the mundane things, and that traction would sort of wear off. And I'd been in the industry probably for quite a while, at that stage. And so I'd always known that I wanted to work for myself, but they're the kind of pocket dreams that you keep to yourself because you don't know if they're entirely possible. But, in the back of your mind, that's always what I wanted to do. And so when I was running a franchise here, locally where I am, I got a little bit of business experience behind me. And look, really, really long story short, whilst I was working for that employer, and I mean, working pretty typical in our industry, it's never 38 hours. I would literally be doing probably 60-hour weeks, getting paid 38, and then got pushed from team leader into a joint sales role as well. And was enjoying it, but, to get a flat wage every week, or, it almost hurts your self-worth. And when I was raising money for the Cancer Council, doing Dancing with the Stars locally, I had found and been told that I had 7 tumors in my thyroids, and really made me reevaluate where I was going. Being regional at the time, coming from a metro area, that was really hard because I thought, okay, well, if I don't have cancer, I'm going to give life a red hot go. But if I do, obviously that's what my year will be. So Australia Day 2018, I found out that I was cancer free, and it meant they could never come back. So I was like, right. At the time, I'd asked my boss for the time off for the surgery. And, given I work 6-7 days a week every week, I thought, not a problem, right? The big C word, and he told me people, have worse in life. And he said he'd give me one of the 3 weeks off and said, okay, we'll play it by ear. Now, I went home and spoke with my pretty new partner at the time and, my mom, and they were absolutely appalled and they were like, quit. But I'm like, okay, but where to from here? If you've worked up to a team leader role in property management and you're in a regional area, team leader roles they're not a dime a dozen like property management roles. And so I knew that I could probably get a walk-in start as a property manager here or, Tamworth, which is about 45 minutes away. But once again, I knew that wouldn't fill that cup. That passion just wasn't there for a property management role. I really liked the team leader role and I had big ideas. And so sitting in the hospital, I saw this star sign and it said, you'll overcome, a health scare and embark on a business venture. And the lady from Chamber of Commerce at the time said, look, why don't you go out on your own? And I was like, Stacey, like, I have $0 now. Like, the $3,000 I think I had saved lasted approximately a month with not working, having quit. So I thought, do I go back to a metro area or do I stay here? And, and she planted that seed. And so I then rang Dennis and Darren and said to him, look, thought I had cancer, had, pretty major surgery, but I'm fine now, can't come back. I also have just found out I'm pregnant, wasn't supposed to be able to have kids. So much shock. And, genuinely thought they would be like, you are crazy. You have $0, girl. No, now is not the time. And Dennis distinctly said, what took you so bloody long? And it was those words. And I thought, you know what, if people like Dennis and Darren can believe in me and think I can do this, even under these circumstances, the one thing I knew about myself was that I am so determined, and I don't ever allow myself to it's like sink or swim mentality. Like, failure is not an option to me. And I don't care if it's you go through plan A fails, plan B fails, you keep going until you find something that works. And that's all I knew about myself. So I looked into this big sea of blackness, and it genuinely felt like that. Just looking out into the darkness, not knowing. For someone who'd had 1, 3, 5-year goals, they'd all been blown up. So I was like, okay, where do we go from here? And, and it was that fear. It's that betting on yourself and taking that leap of faith and just hoping and praying that it works out. So
going just back a step, because in WA, we need to be licensed to, operate a trust account and have the business. Do you need to do that as well? And had you already done that? Done the course and had those licenses?
Great question. When I was in hospital, my mom had said, all right, you have not had time off your entire working life since you were 18. Why don't you take this time? First week home from hospital, I was like so bored. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't do this. So I reached out to the REI New South Wales. I had done the Cert 4, which is what is called the licensing course here now. But because I had done that back from 2009 till 11, I believe, the modules had changed. So there was a gap. So they had essentially started telling me I would need to redo the Cert 4 licensing course. And I said, look, I've been in the industry for 10 years and I was only 4 modules short at that point. So that narrator down there, I believe the name was really lovely, and said, all right, well, maybe we can just have you sit an exam. We'll test your skill level and then we can look at that. So obviously passed the exam with flying colors, and all they made me do was just the trust accounting module. So then I was able to get the license already. So I know there's some people here, there's obviously the type class 1 and class 2. So I know a lot of property managers now are the class 2 and they've just got to try and then get their license. And so, but yeah, look, it took me less than a week, I think, or 2 weeks out of hospital, and I had the license. And so I was kind of like, okay, well, first tick on the box down. What's next?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Sensor Global saves lives with automatic compliance and manages smoke alarms, gas and water leak detection with 24/7 remote management. It provides complete control, reduced risks, and improved compliance for property managers. To find out more, speak to Anthony Booth or head over to sensorglobal.com.
What I want people to hear is that if you are a property manager and if you even have the tiniest little bit of inkling that maybe it could be something that you might consider in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I would encourage you to make that decision now and start exploring the option of doing the course and doing the modules. And because there's no rush, because you don't plan to do it in the next 12 months, but at least you've got it. And I think I love having choices. I remember I did my diploma back when I was 20 years old after a couple of years in the industry. And I did it then not because I don't think I thought that I wanted to have my own agency, but I definitely thought, well, you know what, if I do it, then I've got it, and then if I have the opportunity, I will, I've done it, it's dusted. And it's that whole one step ahead. And I think people should, despite the whole movement of live in the present, we also need to be one step ahead so that, you know what, if you do have that crappy job and you do have that time in your life next year or the year after where you go, you know what, fuck that, like I'm out of here, I'm going to go start my own business. You've got your diploma, you've got your license. Like it's not going to ever be wasted either, because I've got someone in my team actually who's going to start doing it. It's not going to be wasted, because you know what, if anything, if she never has her own real estate agent, she has done that extra education for her own personal career anyway.
I think it's really good. I'm someone who's a bit nerdy. Like my resume, even if like I don't need a certificate for something, like I've done courses and things just because I think, oh, that'd be great on the resume. So I'd always thought maybe I should get this. And I'd had, employers in the past, offered to help me get it, and it just didn't eventuate. So yeah, in the end, I'm glad that I did and I got it. And I was lucky that I got in right before the big changes here in New South Wales, because I think then they changed like the time frame longer before you could operate solo once you had it. I think it was 12 months or something then. So it just, I don't know if you believe in the universe, but everything that happened that year, like I used to see that, I don't know if it's meme or mem on Facebook at the time, and it would say, your employer will literally replace you within a day if you die. Like, basically the takeaway is put yourself first. And so when I quit that job and didn't know where I was going, it was such a wake up call. And it was like the universe was screaming at me, girl, get your ass into gear. We've got bigger things to do. And so I've just followed that through since. And everything else that happened after that just was so organic. I just wrote a bit of a to-do list and was like, okay, well, where do you think you should start? And one of the first things I thought is, at the time I was doing a lot of research, and our local council actually give grants. So I would really advise people as well, don't be afraid to look for help in those areas. There are grants everywhere. Our local council, whether people love them or hate them, they're really supportive of new business. So I actually applied for a grant. I remember walking in there, with my application, and on the same day, I'd been speaking to this lady from, I think it was like Jobs Australia or something like that. And because I'd had to go on Centrelink, which was mortifying when you've worked your whole life. And, that's not a lot of money either, to try and survive on. So really still in that thick fog of, where am I going? And she asked me if I needed help with the resume. I said, no, look, mine's pretty good. Sent it through. She said, oh, geez, you're more qualified than we are. And she actually then probably changed my life in the suggestion that she said, look into the NICE program. And so that was a government program. So you go to them basically with a business idea. And if they see merit in that, they will invite you to do the 3-month pre-course. Now, for me, I was obviously heavily pregnant at the time, incredibly sick, but I pushed myself through that 3 months. It was a 2-hour round trip, to go over and do it. And that was great. They have a business mentor who's there. You're there with other people who are obviously a little bit like-minded. And once you complete that pre-course, they will offer you a placement. And so from there, I think it was around $680, $700 a fortnight they would give you towards your business. Now, that didn't matter if you were partnered. You could be partnered. It didn't matter how much money your business was earning. You literally, that was your money. So even if the business was making $1 million, which I know is obviously unlikely, but it wouldn't have mattered. That money would be yours for a 9-month period. And then you were given a business mentor for a 12-month period thereafter to see you through the transition. So it was such a wonderful tool. I then found out that I was given, I think, a few $1,000s from the local council. So whilst starting out, that's not a huge amount of money, it definitely helped. I was able to put that into marketing and branding my little car and things like that. So
I was just going to ask you how you spent that money. So you've given hypothetically $2,000 grant money. What's the best way to spend that $2,000? And did you spend it the best way, or would you have done it different in hindsight?
Good question again. Look, a few $1,000s feels like a lot, but you kind of tear through it quite quickly. So I got my little car branded at the time. I was still paying off my little Audi A1 I'd brought up with me from the city. And so I got the logo on it. And that was such a moment. It was so exciting. And, being like at the time, like, living on, $700 a fortnight was incredibly difficult. So I was scraping every cent. And I think that's the biggest lesson I want people to learn is like, I didn't start with, there was no cash flow. There was absolutely no backing. I didn't have clients that I knew were immediately going to come on. I was broke. We could not fill our fridge with food. We'd scrape dollars together for pasta sauce jars. Like we literally were in the tightest financial situation we'd ever been after I had to quit my job. So it was very scary. So to be given 3,000, I wanted to utilize it. So some of those bigger ticket items, I've got a, fellow who's become like a really, really close friend, Craig. He has this company in Melbourne called Clicky. And he was sort of like a few years into his business journey. And I genuinely feel like he says the other day, he's like, no, I didn't take pity on you, but I know that he's always looked after me. And I just went to him and said, look, I need a website, but I have literally like not much money at all. So I created myself a website on Wix, and that's very embarrassing to show someone who's like a graphic designer and does websites. And I was expecting him to like laugh it out the door. And he actually was very kind and said, it's actually not that bad, Kate. And so what he did was he then just added the really difficult, the appointment bookings and the plugins. He did those sort of difficult tasks. And I think he charged me maybe like, $500 instead of the thousands. Like I'd been quoted between 3,000 and 5,000 to create a website. And I thought for someone like me who it took like, probably 2 months to save up the $180 for business cards, that was just not going to be possible. So once again, I think, it's who you know. And if you're honest with people genuinely like to see the underdogs, come up and win. So at the same time, because I'd been raising money for the Cancer Council, there was a fellow I interviewed as part of that journey, and he'd had testicular cancer a couple of times, and he was similar in age. So I reached out to him. He was working for a local printing company here who was providing the printer at my old work. And he was like, I was wondering what happened to you, and sort of told him the story and said, I need to do, because I was doing a lot of coursework at the time, I was doing the Cert 3 in business management with the NICE program. You come out of that with the Cert 3 as well. So, back then, we still use paper. We had to print. So he said, look, I actually have a decommissioned, really big, like old copier. He said, it's 2 cents a copy. He said, how do you feel about that? And I was like, you are an angel. And so I still remember them bringing it out and wheeling it up into the house. And I was so excited to have, just a printer so I could start printing brochures and letterbox dropping. And he then put me in touch. And this is the domino effect that I think the universe, if it's meant to be, it will just fall into place. Yes, you have to push and be determined. But he put me in touch with a lady from Moree who'd been 18 months into her business journey. And it's really important to surround yourself with others who are like-minded, who understand that journey, because I was able to ask her those questions like, property management software where I'd been working was a little bit old school. They weren't really up on cloud-based. It was very new at the time. And I wanted something where I could work from home or an office and, sort of looking into the future. And she was able to say, oh, look, why don't you try Property Me? And, really sort of like helped make some of those choices a bit clearer. And she's like, it's cost effective. And she was able to tell me, like REI at the time, the membership, if you went through a particular insurance company for the business, they actually would give you a year's free membership with REI, which meant I got REI forms live for the documents then essentially for free. And then through the NICE program, they said, look, is there anything we can help you with? And I said, well, look, the business insurance is quite a lot of money. I don't know how I'm going to pay it. And the last step with NICE is you have to have the insurance in place before you can start trading. So they actually said, look, we can help you cover that. So they sent me to Jobs Australia, and they actually paid my first year's worth of insurance. I didn't actually have to cover that. So, there's so much help out there, but I think when you're looking into the abyss, you don't know where it is. And so I kind of learned like a ping pong ball, just speaking to different people who put me into different, like, sports, and the things I learned, like, people just don't really like sort of know where to go for that, for that help. So what you're doing is great, Ash.
Yeah, well, and what Kate's referring to is the startup course, mentoring course that I'm doing because I've had 4 people reach out to me in the last couple of weeks, and I'm considered a safe person to reach out to ask questions. How do I start up a rent roll? How do I do this? So I've created a mentor group where which is no cost, where people can, we can talk about those things. But a couple of things I've just written down on my notes that I just wanted to go through was, I absolutely agree with you. I trust the universe immensely. And I'm thinking that this podcast will be one of those signs that someone is listening to, has been thinking about it, and this will be their sign to go out and do your course and take that first step. So I wrote down a hashtag universe speaking. So whoever's listening to this podcast, if this is the sign that you needed, share it on my Instagram, tag me into it, and hashtag universe speaking, because I think that'll be fun to see how many people do that. The second thing is definitely the local grants. I think you're absolutely right. People do not know that there is a lot of support out there. And while, so some businesses like me started off with borrowing money from a bank. So I remember borrowing $30,000 against my mortgage at the time, and then putting that into a business account. And I paid myself from day one, and that's how I budgeted for 6 months worth of expenses, including my wage. However, you've done it a different way, which is so great to hear, where you have collected those grants and you have lived, really scraped through, like from a personal point of view, to make it work. And I've actually got a friend who did exactly the same thing as you as well. So it's actually more common than what people think. And I think that's really interesting for people to hear. The third one I just wanted to go through with you, and you talked about doing your signage on your car, which I think was probably really smart. But I have had a lot of people respond to my messages or my post about this mentor group. And what was actually really funny is that a couple of people who messaged me, I was quite surprised at, and I messaged them back and I said, how many rentals do you have? Thinking that their presence, and by their presence, they've got maybe more than what I thought, because in the mentor group, it's really for people from that 0 to maybe 50 properties. Anyway, this lady messaged me back and she said, I can't remember how many, she said maybe 15 properties. And I was like, wow, I actually would never have guessed that, because your social presence is so good. I just assumed you had a couple of hundred. So what I want to touch on is that by you having that car and by you having that branding, you know that you don't have any properties, but no one else knows that, do they? And isn't that funny, the whole perception of marketing?
There's actually a thing called, I've spoken to my therapist about it over the years. Like, I've got a team of ladies that I go to when it's a little bit too much, and I go in and have these little explosions, and then I'm good. And I had said to them through this journey, I felt like an imposter. Now, I want people to be prepared for that, because 100%, pretty much you're pretending to be the person you're eventually going to be before you are that person. And so 100%, at the time, I was just lucky that, I lived in a metro area. So I had saved up a deposit. I brought this little Audi A1, which was quite a flash little cutesy car. So it was a perfect company car. So when the pink managed by Kate went across the side, it just really looked very elegant. And, like you said, at that time, it was hilarious. I had 3 clients, and here I am driving around in an Audi. So I would also save up really hard. My mum was always at me about spending money and wasting it on different things. She could never understand why I would say, go and buy a forever new blazer and matching skirt combination that was, much more expensive when you could probably get something so cheap at Kmart. And I'm like, because you've got to feel confident. And if you're going into an appraisal and you feel like, oh, I'm in a $15 Kmart skirt, and it messes with that mentality, save up and buy, even if it's one outfit that makes you feel good, buy a pair of shoes or a bag that makes you feel wonderful, walk down the street with confidence. And so I think that was a big thing. Like, I've been very conscious from the beginning about branding. And now 5 years in, it's quite funny that people, when I ask them the question, you know, where did you see or hear about us? And, you know, a lot of them are like, you know, oh, well, I've seen you out and about. I've seen your car, you know, I see your signs. And social media, like, huge. It's something that's free. So I used to run little giveaways, campaigns, and do like quirky things. And I have, from the very beginning, tried to educate investors and tenants, because no one was doing that here. Everyone did the generic just listed or for lease or leased, but no one was really actually doing or filling in that part of the social media market. So I've branched into TikTok, Instagram, not so much Instagram, but Facebook, love it. And so I was able to build a pretty big following. And then what I found was really bizarre. Like, these people, like these big name people in our industry, would add me when I was still fairly like new in this realm, and I didn't know who they were. So people like Josh Teslin, who I read an article made $7 million last year. I'd been friends with him on Facebook for years, or we'd go to conferences and I'd see like Leanne Pilkington from like, you know, who was director of the like REI, president of the REI and things like that. And they would just start adding me, and I never understood why. So I had actually created such a presence. So like you said, Ash, I think that people felt it, they could see it, and that was important. I would actually argue with my marketing guy, Craig, you know, my BFF from Melbourne, a lot. And we would be at loggerheads because I said to him, I need an office. I'm in a regional area. And that was a really big point where he was working from him. He was like, absolutely, huge overhead. You do not need it. I'm like, but for me, I knew that in our area, I needed that presence on the street, I think, to show people I was serious, I was here. And like I said, we've got so many agents servicing the one area. Most of them are generational businesses who have been here their whole lives. Like, they've got friends, cousins, like 10th cousins probably, where I was new to the area, and I've had to grow from the very beginning. And what people won't know, because I'll talk your ear off, is I actually get quite anxious. And when I'm not in work mode, I actually don't have a lot of friends or networks. I tend to keep to myself quite a lot. So I wasn't networking or doing those things that are probably really important to do. And so it has been a slower growth journey compared to, you know, agents in metro areas, but even the ones here who it's probably much easier for them, you know, to start here than it was for me. So yeah, look, you've just got to go out of that comfort zone, I think, and like, you know, exhaust all the different avenues. And it's okay to not have all the answers, because guess what? With every different situation, you learn something new, and that's all it is. I was once told by an old business mentor, he said, "You're a rock star, Kate." He said, "Time's just got to catch up." Didn't understand what it meant then, but I guess, you know, as a 36-year-old woman now, Rog, I like totally understand what he meant by that. So.
And we all make mistakes. I think for me, my biggest mistake was something that I've only realized recently, and this is after me being in business for 18 years. So I was always told, you know, Ash, you're the business owner, you should do your BDM work because, you know, you convert easy. And that was true. But I had that sort of drummed into me. So I never looked at any other options. I just thought, I've just got to do my own BDM work. And I was happy to do it, don't get me wrong. But when I hired my first BDM, so now after 18 years of business, I decided to get a BDM because the work was just coming through. Our team was growing. It was becoming quite full on. And Sam joined our team in October last year. And after a month, I was like, I regret not making this decision earlier. I should not have listened. I should have got a BDM way earlier on in the game. And it's an absolute true investment having her. So for me, I kick myself every day. Why did I not do that earlier? So we all have those stories. We all have those things that maybe we would have done different. I definitely would have done that different. I think I would have also probably made the switch to some really cool technology programs earlier on in the game, instead of now having to, as our portfolio gets bigger, now having to make all those changes. I feel not having to make those changes, but having to make those changes if we want to make sure that we've got room for growth and capacity and streamlining everything. I feel like if I probably took it a little bit more seriously in the early days with my processes, and programs, it probably would have been a bit more seamless. So they were my two mistakes that I probably would have improved on if I was to start again. But I love the mention that you had with the free marketing. I hate spending money on marketing. So if I do, I'm very, very careful, very careful. And there is just so much free available that I don't, and I think you would agree that that shouldn't be absorbing too much of your budget, not when there's too many free options.
Look, social media is wonderful because it is free and you can be so creative. And, you know, like as I see you're quite big on TikTok, and we spoke about this in the States last year. You can get, like, I accidentally dropped a cough medicine bottle when my kids were sick on a stovetop at home, and it was ceramic and it smashed it. And so like, I was like, hey, cool. Grabbed, like, you know, the phone and was like, hey, tenants, like, you know, be careful what you're storing above, like, you know, because everyone does. Like, a lot of people use that as their medicine cabinet above like the stovetop. And it had over 10,000 views. So, like, I mean, if you had to pay for that on Facebook or anywhere else, like, you're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars. The one area I have spent a lot of money, and look, I don't know if it could be controversial or not, but for me, a realestate.com account here was huge. So I actually do, and look, I had to save up for it. I started off with Domain because they were so much cheaper at the time. But they just weren't getting as much traction, I don't think, and I certainly couldn't afford to have both at the same time. I then transitioned to both. I was featuring on both, but the amount of thousands I spent last year in marketing was just crazy. So I ended up like letting go of the Domain subscription and stuck with realestate.com. But I do spend the bit extra because the other bigger agencies can't afford to spend it across the board, like, you know, and a lot of them don't charge as a point of difference. They don't charge for marketing. So you know what I do now? We do the 360 tours. We, like, you know, so there's a cost obviously in buying the tripod, but you're using like your iPhone. So make sure you've got the latest technology, and, you know, you pay that off each month with your bill. So we got the 360 tours. We do the video walkthroughs on TikTok, like, you know, just trying to utilize every avenue. We use places like Box Brownie for like filtering photos, not over filtering. There's a huge trend I've noticed with agents, and it's like, you wouldn't even know it was the same house. Like, so we try and keep them very genuine, but if it's a gloomy day and it's raining, you know, we might change out a sky or something like that. So we make sure our marketing is top notch, because what I found in the beginning, I had nothing to lease. A lot of the properties coming over in the beginning were people who had tenanted properties. So the biggest traction I think I genuinely get probably is from places like realestate.com, because at the moment, you know, I might have like 4, 5, 6 properties to lease. And so there's this sea of pink, and it's the first thing you see because they're features. And once again, it's that illusion that, you know what, oh, wow. And, you know, it might be just because the other listings aren't all in a row for the other agents, or they're unbranded, or they're smaller. So utilize where you're spending your dollars. So to me, I think that if I was to go back, I probably would have done the same thing. But that's where I do spend a lot of the marketing budget, is on those bigger ticket items and programs like realestate.com that are getting the audience. Like,
yeah, and at the end of the day, new managements, whether if you are thinking of selling or thinking of renting out your home, you are going onto realestate.com before you speak to the agent to decide, oh, I wonder what my property, you know, would get for rent, and you would look at comparisons. So I agree. I think that is actually the first place that investors and people wanting to sell their homes are looking first. So it makes sense. I still can't bring myself to pay for a banner ad. So I haven't, but you've made me sort of think, you know, I should stop being so tight with my money and pay for it. But yeah, for me, like, I think when I started, because I didn't have any listings either, I used to do a lot of to-lets just so I could get those listings on realestate.com, because I still value, I still knew that that's the first point that clients were looking at. So I just had to work out a way. And I might have even, I think I contacted people on Gumtree and just offered to sort of advertise their homes for them. You know, like, I'll just advertise for, I think at the time it might have been $100, for example, on realestate.com. And I would say to those private landlords, listen, I'm happy just to advertise your property on realestate.com, and I used to put their details. This is going back, a long time ago. I put the client's details, so they would get all the inquiries, but I would still get that presence of, okay, we've got a listing up, and that's how I got a bit of traction. So they're just little things, I guess, that people do to make them look. It's about looking busier than what you are sometimes, isn't it?
I think that's what it is. It's traction. And I find that in the beginning, you kind of have a stop and start, and you might get on a roll of a couple of properties, and then you think, oh, yay, it's happening. And then you might have like a period of nothing. And that's one thing I really want to convey to people. Self-doubt is the biggest killer, and you've got to push through it, because in those early years, it won't make sense. You will have a lot of stop and starting. Like that's what it felt like to me. 2 steps forward, 10 steps back quite often. And then even going into my 3rd year, and obviously I squeezed two babies in as well. So I wasn't always in a full gun-ho capacity, nor did I really know what I was doing, to be honest. Like I have absolutely winged this. Like I just knew that I felt like the universe, there was a higher purpose. And so even 3 years in and 4 years in, I was still having very serious self-doubt. I was still, I think 3 years in, I only had around 30 managements. And then after the birth of my son, and I'd had a pretty rough time with that. And of course, COVID. So we'd gone from 2 years of drought here. Who opens a business during drought? I don't know, but I did. And then we literally almost just survived that. And then COVID come in, and then we had all of these like sort of lockdowns. And so it was kind of a blessing to me in a sense, because I could be home with my babies and work from home. It almost made that a normalcy, where prior to that, it was not normal. You were almost at a disadvantage being a mobile agent if you didn't really have an office space. But then after COVID, I literally remember having to ring my car insurance company one day, and the lady answered, and I could hear her kids in the background. And then I got transferred to a guy, and guess what? His kids are in the background, and you don't often hear that with men. They don't have the same problem set that women do. So I just thought, this is great. It's going to change our industry. And I think it has. And same with applications. It meant it's no longer rude to ask for them up front, rather than, maybe having like consistent open homes showing huge volumes of people through. You kind of know from the applications, and might only have to show through a couple of like potentials. So it kind of, I think did actually create some positives. I still remember my competitors probably panicking when COVID hit, because none of them had been cloud-based yet. But to me, I'd already been set up like that for the previous 2 years. So it didn't really change anything. So it was kind of really good. It worked in with motherhood for me, and, whatever else. But once he was born, I remember about the 4-month mark, I got a phone call from a local church, and they had a ton of old nuns' quarters, and, he asked if I'd come in and meet with them. Now, I had literally just had a pretty severe C-section. My husband said, you can't even walk. And I said, you watch me. So I toddled in there, they probably thought, what is wrong with her? But I was like, I can't miss this, because, it's the equivalent to about 12, 13 managements. And so went in and met with them, and they were very impressed. And sometimes it just takes that traction, just that 1 or 2 in a row to change your mindset, or, to get a landlord who might have 2 or 3. So from there, I remember a couple of different owners from different agencies ringing. One agency in particular, I don't know what was happening there, but a few of their clients rang, and 2 of them had 4 properties each. And then one of them actually referred a sister, and she had a management, and then she ended up bringing another one on, and she referred someone. So to build that traction, don't be disheartened. It may not happen in a year. It may not even happen in 2. For me, even 3 years in, I'd only experienced, and then once that big traction happened, guess what? It stopped again. So last year, going into my 4th year, and even the start of this year, I thought, okay, we're only about that, 60 to 70 managements. How do we grow? And I had this conversation with my property manager at the time, and I think the universe delivered. An agency from Sydney who sell off the plan up here. I'd just been chatting to them for about a year, giving them free advice, just being really genuine. No, I wouldn't look at this area. Yes, this is a great block, whatever else. They then said, look, would you mind if we referred our clients to you? I was like, absolutely. And they didn't even ask for a commission competition. They didn't want to split. They just wanted their clients to be so well looked after that they would then be happy enough to invest again. So I take that very seriously. So look for your referral partners because, they can be anywhere. And that same company now have put me in contact with the New South Wales BDM for that builder who I had a meeting with last week and has quite a substantial amount of properties coming on in different areas. It's another thing we had to look at here. Like I know in metro areas, you might be, say half an hour out from another suburb or 20 minutes in traffic. Here, we are one suburb of 13,000. And then there's about an hour and 10 radius to everything else. So it's about 45 minutes to an hour to Tamworth, which is the biggest sort of major city closest to us. And, there's a lot of pockets of smaller towns I'd never considered. Didn't really want to branch out. I thought I might branch into the Hunter Valley. It's where I'm from. It's a metro area. I thought as a backup to the rent roll here in case we ever experience drought, in case the mines sort of, weren't performing well again. But what has happened is the clients I have here have properties in surrounding suburbs. And so they were really, really pushing my clients. They were like, you will be looking after this. I'm like, I don't look after Tamworth. They're like, no, you will be looking after this. And I was like, oh, look, okay. I go over there regularly for office supplies and whatnot. So why not? And I've now branched into quite a few pockets of areas. Like, one is a town called Coonabarabran, and they had very few agencies there. So I think there's only one or two. And like, whilst it's only a 3,000 or 4,000 population, there's not much competition there. So people are seeking me out. And so I no longer am looking for work. Like it just comes to you. So look at those demographics, look and see how many agents are servicing what areas, and just be a bit strategic, I think, as well with like, where you are looking at servicing, because it's much easier to get business from there than here where it's, so cutthroat. It's like 1 of 14. Like, so.
Yeah, I had a similar situation where we were very much just like the local, hyper local we were. And then a couple of years ago, I started getting inquiries for about 45 minutes south, which I wouldn't normally have done, but I was getting like a lot of them in a row from a referral partner. And then I thought, you know what, like stuff, I'll just see where this goes. And now we've got probably, I don't know, 300 or more properties in that location.
Oh, wow.
So I'm glad that I said yes to that, even though it's not my core area. It now has become a core area, and I've revolved my business now into pockets. But it was because I was open. I think, I know there's going to be people, this is a very sort of maybe an unpopular opinion, but people I think can be quite fussy at the start. And I get the whole, you stay true and, bring on properties like in your area. But the truth is, I said yes to a lot. And you know what? I said yes for my first 100. And then I go, okay, now I've got 100. Now I'm going to go, okay, well, what pockets are working? Where am I getting all the inquiries from? What location, what demo, location is the best one, like where the majority are coming from? And sure, at that point, I started probably being a little bit more careful with the pocket I was creating. But I did that because I wanted the business. And I'm not talking about bad business, but I'm talking about business that maybe is outside your area and you've got time to service them. Maybe just consider where it goes to, and maybe you might be surprised that it could be potentially the pocket that your business needs to be focused on and not where you originally thought you wanted to focus on. You know what I mean?
100%. And that's what I have. I just got goosebumps when you were saying that, because that's exactly what's happening in this little pocket. I started to get these calls and I was like, what? I didn't even know where this town was. I think I'd driven through it once on the way back from one of Dennis's conferences to get fuel. Like I genuinely didn't know. And so I pulled the map up and I was like, oh, and started looking at the demographic. I had this one owner from out there and she had 3. And I thought, wow, to get 3 in Canada is, it's cutthroat. It's really hard to get 3. So I thought, look, I'll meet her. And so while I was out there, I went and grabbed Subway for lunch and I spoke to the guys out there who own the business and just asked them and found, it is a cliquey little town there as well. A lot of the people had been born and raised and stayed there, or they moved back. So just really got to know the area. And this landlord, she had all of so I'm really careful with who I bring on. I probably could have grown triply as fast if I had of reduced fees, if I had of just taken on anything that came in the door. But it was really important for me to only take on clients who share my like values and my ethics. And, if they don't, I'm sorry, I'm just not willing to, take on, properties and people that don't align with our core values. And so this lady was just so like such a breath of fresh air, great investor, cared about her tenants so much. And she literally said, like, in front of the tenants, they said, will you be taking them on? Or will Kate be taking them on? And she looked at me and she said, oh, well, I hope so. And she kind of put me on the spot. And I was like, oh. And so from that, I knew that she would probably be bringing those across. And then in that sort of like, very direct interim, a fellow rang from Sydney and he had 5 that they'd purchased. And he had said that his property manager hadn't got back to him in 3 months. Now I was like, what do you mean 3 months? And he said, oh, she's got some stuff going on. Like, I don't want to bother her. I was like, what? This just seems really bizarre. And then the more calls that I was getting, like you said, and then I was asking them, well, where did you hear about me from? Like, I'm an hour and 15 minutes, like, way outside of here. And in my mind still, that imposter syndrome, I'm still little, like I'm, not worthy, whatever else. Not realizing that, there is that presence there. People do see you over social media and people talk about you. And the way it happened was there was a sales agent only doing sales there. And he didn't trust in the services that were being provided in the community. So he, one of his friends' daughters was a landlord of mine and had given good feedback. And he'd known somebody else who had dealt with me and like had a positive interaction as well. So he was the culprit. He had started like, just from what he'd heard and what he'd seen, started recommending me. And so this name kept coming up over and over. So I ended up ringing him one day and said, are you in town? Like, I'd really love to actually meet you. And, so I've grown out there to about 15 to 20 properties super, super quickly. And I just think in the early days, like that took me years within Canada to get to 20. So, absolutely consider areas you maybe not have considered because there might be like, growth happening there that you don't know about and miss a great opportunity. So,
yeah, and that's exactly, I think, where we'll finish with. And I've written down, look for opportunity and be flexible because in your mind, you might want to be doing this area, but guess what? If your client and you were attracting a certain other area, do you know what? I personally would go, let's see where this is going to take us. And I think that is a good thing for people to keep in mind for sure. And I hope that people listening can sort of see that real, truth, raw side of things from you and I about the way business is and I think both of us, like both socially have, nice presences and, they can see all the good stuff as well. But you know what? It's pretty behind the scenes. It's been pretty simple, trying things. It's not been perfect. And I guess people are too scared to do things until they think it's perfect. And I think you and I are a good example, I mean, particularly yourself, a good example of it. It was never perfect, but you've made it perfect. And I think it is definitely, people just need to see the behind the scenes, and it's not a conversation you can actually go out and ask people, but hopefully you're listening to it and you'll be happy that you've listened to that side of things. And big thing for me is, if you, like I said at the start, if you have been having a little tiny inkling that you might want to start your business or you might consider in the future, go at least do your research, get that course or that license done, and it's never, ever going to be wasted, even if you never use it.
Absolutely.
And that is our chat. So, I mean, I know that you are very open to chat to people. If anyone wants to reach out, please get in touch with yourself or me. The mentoring program that I've got is time sensitive. So obviously today we're recording, it's August 2023. So depending on when you're listening to this podcast, it may not be available, but just know that, us too are both very open to helping people that are struggling a little bit. And if we can't help you, there's definitely people we can refer you to as well that could also help you with that motivation that you might need. Katie, it's a pleasure. It was so lovely to see you again. We should do it more often.
Absolutely.
And I will speak to you soon. Have a good day.
You too.
The Associates Co. provide reliable, fully trained professionals to assist you with running and scaling your property management department, providing high-quality, pre-trained virtual assistants ready to hit the ground running and revolutionize the way you run your portfolio, ensuring your time is spent doing the high-value tasks inside your rent roll that really matter. Not long ago, VAs within a business were considered a luxury. Now they are a staple for any business needing reliable support without the headache of traditional staffing. To find out more, head over to theassociatesco.com.